One man, a wooden bridge, a freezing river beneath him, and 15,000 soldiers who cannot get past him. This is where the story begins. He has no name in any record, no tomb was ever found, just an axe, a pair of worn boots, and one impossible decision. Behind him, an army is breaking apart. Ahead of him stands one of the largest English armies ever assembled, and it has completely stopped. Historians remember kings, they remember conquerors, commanders, emperors, but on this single morning, history belonged to a man whose name no one wrote down. September 25th, 1066, the final morning of the Viking Age, and it would not end the way anyone on either side expected. This is the story of the man who held the bridge. The chronicles say he held it alone, for almost an hour, against everything. The chroniclers wrote about kings every year. They wrote about battles, treaties, and empires. Yet the line that survived the centuries was not about a king. It was about a nameless man standing on a bridge. Who was he? Was he ordered to stay? Or did he choose it himself? A loyal soldier? A berserker? Or something history has no word for? We will get there. But first, you need to understand the world that built him. A world about to end on this very bridge. To understand the man on the bridge, you must understand the man who brought 9,000 warriors across the sea to find him there. Harald Hardrada, King of Norway, one of the most feared rulers alive. Not because of his title, because of everything he survived to earn it. Once you understand his story, what happens on that bridge will hit you completely differently. So pay close attention. Every detail matters. Harald Sigurdsson was born around 1015 in Norway. At just 15 years old, he fought in his very first battle, at Stiklestad. His half-brother, King Olaf, was killed that day. Harald, wounded, fled alone into the forest, a frightened teenage boy with nothing left. Most boys in that position simply vanish from history. Harald made a different choice. He decided he would write history instead, with his own hands. He traveled east, all the way to Constantinople, and joined the Varangian Guard, elite Viking warriors who protected the Byzantine emperor himself. For nearly 15 years, he fought across 3 continents: Bulgaria, Sicily, Jerusalem. Every battle taught him something. He never once stopped learning. He returned to Norway in 1046, scarred, wealthy, and politically dangerous. Within 2 years, by treaty and by force, he became king. Not by birthright, by sheer will. His own men gave him a name: Hardrada, the hard ruler. A name earned, never given. Historians across many countries describe him the same way: physically enormous, personally fearless, and ruthlessly intelligent on the battlefield. But he had one flaw that great men often share. He was never, ever satisfied with what he already had. He looked west, across the cold North Sea, toward a green island he did not yet rule. He wanted England, all of it. In the summer of 1066, he gathered nearly 300 longships, roughly 9,000 warriors, one of the largest Viking fleets in a generation. According to later Norse tradition, he was seen laughing with his commanders, describing what England might look like under Norse rule. He landed in northern England and moved with terrifying speed. 5 days before Stamford Bridge, he crushed the northern earls at Fulford. The city of York surrendered completely. Hardrada demanded hostages, proof of submission. The exchange was set for September 25th at a bridge near York. He had crossed an ocean, destroyed an army, forced a great city to its knees. He had never felt more certain of his destiny. He had 5 days left to live, and he had no idea. None of his 9,000 men had any idea either. Stamford Bridge, a simple wooden crossing over the River Derwent, 7 miles from York, a place no one had ever heard of. Yet, by that morning, his army had grown careless, confident, relaxed. Victory does that to men. It makes them forget how fast it can vanish. September 25th, morning. The air smells of river mud and wood smoke. The sun, unusually warm for late September in northern England, rises slowly. Harald's men had marched 10 miles from their ships at recall. Their chainmail, each suit nearly 30 pounds, was left behind, too hot to wear. They crossed the river and spread across both banks. Warriors sat on the grass, unlacing helmets, sharing dried meat. The mood was almost festive. The smell of sweat and leather drifted on the breeze. Someone sharpened a blade. the scrape of stone on iron carrying across the quiet field.
Then a scout on the ridge went silent. He pointed west, and every man who saw what he was pointing at suddenly stopped breathing. A wall of dust rose on the horizon. Beneath it, the low thunder of thousands of boots. Above it, sunlight flashing off thousands of iron helmets. This was not a surrender party. This was King Harald Godwinson's entire royal army. Huscarls, thanes, infantry, nearly 15,000 strong. Understand what Harald had just done. He marched his army 200 miles in 4 days. The average medieval army covered 15 miles a day. His army covered 50 miles a day. And he did it in total secrecy. No Viking scout warned them. The first sign of his army was the dust itself. Panic tore through the Viking camp like fire through dry grass. Horns blasted, men scrambled for weapons, no armor, no formation, no time left at all. Harald Hardrada rode out wearing only a blue tunic. No armor, no chainmail. Just a king trying to hold together a collapsing army. He had survived worse than this. He shouted commands, gathered his veterans, fought to form a line. For one brief moment, it almost worked. Then, an arrow found him. The chroniclers disagree on exactly where it struck, but the result was the same. He fell from his horse. The king who survived 3 continents of warfare died in an English field, not in glory, but in confusion, in a borrowed linen tunic. Stop. Understand what this does to 9,000 men who crossed an ocean believing their king was invincible. It does not just break morale, it breaks their world. English cavalry crashed forward, linen tunics against iron blades. The Vikings began to collapse under the sudden, overwhelming weight of the attack. Men who had trained their whole lives for shield wall combat now died running, scattered, alone in an open field. Skill alone meant nothing now. The bridge, the only bridge, if the Vikings could cross it, they could reach the far bank, reform their lines, and survive the day. The retreat became a stampede. The wooden planks of Stamford Bridge groaned under the weight of desperate men. Some fell. Some drowned in the cold river. The English vanguard pressed forward, close enough now to smell the fear rising from the Viking ranks. One more push, and it would all be over. If the English took that bridge before the Vikings could reform, it ended here. Every man, every ship, every dream of a Norse England. No one volunteers for what happens next. In every army, in every age, no man chooses to stand alone against 15,000 pursuers. Then, out of the fleeing crowd, one man stopped. While everyone else ran toward safety, he turned around. He pushed back against the tide and walked onto the bridge. He reached the center of the wooden planks, and he stopped. Behind him, an army was running. Ahead of him, an army was coming. Personal fear has no record here, but imagine it anyway. One heartbeat, one breath, and then a choice that history would never forget. Later chroniclers describe what happened next in stunned, almost reluctant detail. They simply wrote down what witnesses saw because no one could explain it. He was unusually large, the old accounts say, a giant of a man carrying a long-hafted Dane axe built to cleave through shields and bone. He planted his boots on the wet planks. The bridge was narrow, 3 men wide at most. He understood exactly what that meant. The English vanguard surged forward, expecting to sweep him aside in seconds. What happened instead, chroniclers would still be writing about a century later. He swung. One arc. Clean. Practiced. The first attacker dropped instantly. The men behind him hesitated, just for a moment, but it was enough. They tried pairs. They tried organized rushes. The narrow bridge defeated every attempt. Numbers meant nothing when only 2 men could reach him at once. The bridge shuddered with every swing. Wet wood, river spray, the smell of blood mixing with the cold morning air. His boots found grip on slick planks. Some later accounts, and historians treat the number cautiously, say he held that bridge against the entire English vanguard for nearly an hour. 40 soldiers. That is the number some chronicles claim fell before him. 1 man, 1 hour. 40 English dead on a single wooden bridge. And yet, this is not why the story matters. Most people who hear this stop here. They miss the layer underneath it completely.
Behind him, on the eastern bank, something was happening that the English army could not see through the dust and chaos of battle. The Vikings were no longer running. They were forming the shield wall. Shields raised, weapons leveled, gaps closing one by one, second by second.
He had given them the one thing no battlefield strategy can manufacture: time. He was not dying pointlessly. He was buying his army its life. Why did he stay? Did he know Harald personally? Fight beside him for years? Was he simply a man who could not leave his brothers to die? We will never know. The English commanders assessed the situation with cold, clear eyes. They could not beat him face to face, so they chose not to try. A soldier found a discarded wooden tub, a swill barrel used for river work. He took a long, iron-tipped spear and climbed inside it. The current carried him silently beneath the bridge, while above him the wooden structure shook with the sound of an ongoing, impossible fight. He looked up through the gaps between the planks. Morning light broke through in narrow strips. He could see the giant's feet, his weight, his rhythm. He waited. The right moment, when the axe rose for a wide swing, when the weight shifted forward, and he drove the spear straight upward. The iron tip passed through the gap in the wood and entered the warrior's body from below. A wound he never saw coming and could never block. Blood dripped between the planks into the river below. The current carried it away, as if trying to wash the story from memory. The axe, raised for another strike, began to tremble. The grip loosened. The man who held the bridge stood motionless for one final moment, as if refusing to fall. Some later writers suggest he may have fought in a berserker-like state, a battle frenzy described in Norse sources. Modern historians remain cautious. What is not in doubt is this: he had been wounded multiple times before that final strike. Arrows, blades, and still he did not stop. He dropped to his knees. The great axe clattered against the wet wood. The bridge, silent for the first time in nearly an hour. The English crossed. They struck the reformed Viking shield wall on the far bank, and the battle resumed. But everything had already changed. The shield wall held for a time, but without armor, without their king, without the shock of surprise, the Vikings could not hold forever. By evening, it was over. The last great Norse attempt to seize the English throne ended beside a quiet Yorkshire river that had just witnessed the end of an age. Of nearly 300 ships that carried them here, later accounts say only 24 were needed to carry the survivors home. Thousands came. Only a fraction returned. King Harald Godwinson stood on the bank of the River Derwent, having pulled off one of the most extraordinary reversals in medieval English history. Harald had 3 days to celebrate the greatest victory of his life. Only 3. Then a rider arrived from the south, breathless, carrying news that changed everything. William of Normandy had landed on the English coast with an army of his own. Harald's exhausted soldiers had to march south, immediately, no rest. 3 weeks and 1 day after Stamford Bridge, Harald Godwinson fell at the Battle of Hastings. An arrow, some chronicles say, through the eye. The bridge is gone now. The wood rotted away centuries ago, but the River Derwent still flows through that quiet valley, exactly as it did that morning. And somewhere beneath those waters, the centuries lost a name they should have remembered. Kings became legends. Kingdoms rose and fell, but the man who held the bridge, the world never forgot what he did.